Hello, everyone. Hi, Blue. Hi, Saikeen. My name is Ezra, otherwise known as E-Soup. Today, after a week, which has felt so long, we're finally getting back to Hugyu and Chia Ching Chung, and I am so glad to be back. Um, I am hoping to go back to twice weekly streams, this week if I can. Um, So like I'm hoping to be able to stream on Wednesday. I haven't gotten a call from the internet service people. So I might try to do like a test run Wednesday morning or Tuesday evening or somewhere around that time and see how a stream is going. If my internet is still not fixed at that point, I'm considering doing like a pre-recording for the Wednesday stream where I would just record myself reading it and then I would post it on a schedule so it would be scheduled to go up at 3 o'clock and as a live premiere. So there would be like live chat as the video is premiering. But that would still it definitely wouldn't have the same vibe as like a regular live stream. Like you wouldn't be able to chat along with me while I'm actually reading it. So I'm questioning if I'm gonna do that or not. Um, if they push back fixing my internet till like the very last minute, the last day they're supposed to be working on things is April 15th. So there's not too much time before this whole thing is done, hopefully. But yeah, let me know what you think about me doing like a Wednesday pre-recording. And then I'm hoping to be, if things are still not fixed, then by next week, Monday, I'll do the same thing. I'll come to my parents' house where their internet is actually reliable, all that jazz. So yeah, what do y'all think? Hi, Sua. Hi, Nina. Blue, you said sounds like a plan. Or we can also wait. Nina, you said I'm fine with the pre-recording. Sua, I'm fine with anything. Yeah, I might end up wanting to do the pre-recording thing. Um, but I think sometime tomorrow I'm gonna do like a test stream and see what's happening. And then maybe if it's still being weird or something, I'll like call my internet and be like, "Yeah, so can you tell me anything more about what's going on?" Every time they're like, we don't know. It's in this time range. They'll call you," and like no one's called me. So I'm just like I don't know. But I we left on a bit of a cliffhanger last time. Uh Chen Man showed up just as things were going down, and he was like, "Hey, who's in your bed?" So that's the whole thing, and I'm nervous and excited to see what is going to happen. Today we are reading chapters 97 to 101. Um, so yeah, please give the stream a like. And we are on page 121 for chapter 97, which is called No Longer the Same. Oh, I'm sorry. I assumed, perhaps we all assumed, that Chen Man was the person coming in. My bad. Also, Xie Ching Chung is in He Yu's bed. So what he said last chapter was, He Yu, there's someone in your bed. Well, the person who came in was He Li. Did we all just assumed this was Chen Man? We were all wrong. Uh, it was a coincidence that He Li was the one who had stepped into the ward. He and his mother had gone out to buy some fruit, but she happened to get an urgent work call, so she'd had He Li go ahead of her and bring the fruit to the sick room. That was how they'd ended up in this situation. He Li was young, but Liu Jishu had always spoiled him terribly and never put any pressure on him, so he had already done all manner of shady things. With all the time he spent hanging around hedonistic rich brats in Yanzhou, he was nothing like his elder brother. who hadn't slept with anyone until he was 19. He was very attuned to these sorts of things. Although he hadn't gotten a clear look at the person his brother had hidden from view, he was certain that before he came into the room, Yu had been fooling around with someone. Hilarious. Now this was a big fucking deal. He was thrilled. Frankly speaking, being the brother of someone like Yu was the opposite of a good time. Even if nobody said it aloud, people definitely compared the two of them in their heads. He didn't hold a candle to his model elder brother when it came to looks, ability, or character, so how could he possibly be okay with it? Of course he couldn't. But he never could have imagined that he would actually run into his brother engaging in sickroom play today. Sweet, serves you right, Yu. He started trying to guess which pretty little nurse had attracted his brother's attention. Or perhaps it was a coldly beautiful lady doctor who had made his brother lose control. He felt like a fish about to leap straight through the dragon's gate. There is a footnote. The Li in Li's name means carp. The idiom carp leaps through the dragon's gate is used to describe someone getting a big break, and refers to the legend that a carp who leaps over a certain waterfall can become a dragon. Eyes gleaming, he stuck out his head to peer inside. This was too fucking awesome. He wished he had a loudspeaker to tell the whole world over and over again. Everyone, come quick and take a look at this. His brother was even more outrageous than he was. His brother was definitely up to no good. He was definitely fucking a pretty doctor right here in the hospital. That's right. There was no way he could be wrong. Today was the day that Yu's reputation would be ruined. Where was his loudspeaker? He was about to break into song like an emancipated serf. Unfortunately, Yu didn't give him the chance. Straightening out his clothes, Yu walked out from behind the curtain of his own accord. He had pulled out the IV needle, ow, and was absent-mindedly rubbing the dark bruise on the back of his hand as he emerged. He looked up. Yes, there's someone in my bed. Well, well, well. You always seem so dignified. Who would have thought that you... How is this any of your business? Li's smile vanished in an instant. Let me ask you instead. What are you doing, coming in here without knocking? Delivering condoms? Li was struck dumb. He had never seen the side of his brother before. His brother was always warm and kind, respectful and modest. You might even call him a doormat. No matter what anyone in their family said, Yu pretty much never spoke a word of opposition. In that moment, Li seemed to have mindlessly stumbled into the most remote corner of a forbidden forest, wholeheartedly believing that he would be able to steal the dragon's hidden treasure. He'd set out like a hero, ready to receive everyone's newfound respect. But before he even caught sight of the treasure, something appeared in a fissure of that cold, gloomy mountain cave. The eye of a great dragon with a thorny hide. The massive dragon peered at him from beyond the fractured rock, its pupil like a mirror of colored glass, so huge that it reflected his whole body. The instant the dragon's breath puffed out, all the blood in his body turned to ice. Li's entire heart went numb. This was his scholarly and courteous Daga. Smoothing out his clothes, Yu stepped forward and grabbed Li by his deathly pale face. Curling his fingers, he stroked his face bit by bit. This is so interesting that, like, Li is just not aware at all. He does not know about the side of his brother at all. And I was thinking about how I wonder if their relationship would have been different and Li would have felt less, like, jealous if he had grown up knowing that Yu had a dark side and wasn't, like, the perfectly behaved child. Li, seeing as you've... Wait. I might have missed a line, I'm not sure. He Yu stepped forward and grabbed He Li by his deathly pale face. Curling his fingers, he stroked his face bit by bit. He Li, seeing as you've already barged in, out of what little brotherly affection I have for you, I'll give you a warning. You'd better not tell a soul about what happened here today. Of course, if you are brave enough, you can try me. See if you can afford the price. What price? Li's legs were shaking and his voice had gone shrill and distorted, but he still dredged up some courage. And yeah, Blue, you're right. To be fair, they've barely seen each other. He Yu was kept away from the family. So how can He Li know the real He Yu? And Henry Meat Bun loves reminding us that putting people on a pedestal hurts everyone. Yep. I'm telling you, He Yu, if Mom finds out that you dared threaten me like this, go tell her then. He Yu raised an eyebrow as he cut him off. Go on and tattle to her. Go right ahead. You can't. You wouldn't. I can't? He Yu asked with an easy smile, looking him in the eye. Do you know why, when you were 5, your leg would always get caught in the wheel of your bike halfway through your ride? Do you know why, on your first day of school, you lost all your new textbooks, and no matter how you tried to explain yourself, no one would listen? The first time you messed around behind our parents' backs, you got a room at the Golden Ocean Club in Yanzhou, then turned around and told them you spent the night at a friend's house. Did you really think that no one else knew about it? All the color drained from He Li's face. How did you... I even have video footage. But it's too disgusting. I don't want to look at it a second time. With a thunk, He Li fell back against the door, sweating so heavily that he looked like he'd been fished out of water. I love all the carp metaphors happening. His lips were trembling. His first glimpse of the ferocious beast behind He Yu's human mask had left him so stunned that he could barely speak. You. So you'd better listen to me carefully, He Li. He Yu's voice was very soft as he spoke directly into He Li's ear. Yet his words felt so heavy that He Li could barely keep himself upright. If you dare breathe a word of this to anyone... He Yu suddenly pressed in close, his voice laced with threat. You won't have even half a minute of peace for the rest of your life. Try me if you don't believe me. Henry, Janae Henning voice, oh carp. I can kind of imagine that. With that, he released his brother. He Li slid to the ground, the colorful red delicious apples, tangerines, and grapes spilling out of the fruit basket and onto the floor. He Yu looked at him disdainfully from above, his eyes bitingly cold. Now scram. After He Li left, He Yu pulled the curtain open again. The youth met the man's gaze. Xie Qingcheng was standing next to the hospital bed with his arms crossed, watching him grimly. From his expression, it was obvious that he had heard every single word of the brothers' conversation. He Yu's mood had been spoiled. He stepped forward silently, staring at Xie Qingcheng's face. He lifted a hand to straighten his collar, which was already perfectly neat. His gaze moved back and forth over Xie Qingcheng's face, his eyelashes quivering like the tremulous light of the Milky Way spilling across the night sky. Xie Qingcheng. Xie Qingcheng did not respond. Listen, if the two of us had died in the water, everything would have ended just like that. But now we're both still alive. And no matter what you say, I know that you're different from everyone else. He Yu was met with silence. It's impossible for things to stay the same as before, he went on. I can't see you the same way, and you can't see me the same way. I hope that you can accept this fact. To Xie Qingcheng, it seemed like He Yu had gone even more insane. Now that he'd learned the truth, it seemed he had laid down some of his hatred. But in its place, he had picked up some new emotion that neither of them could fully understand yet. Anyone could enter the ward at any time, so He couldn't willfully pick up right where he'd left off. But still, he turned his face into the hollow of Xie Qingchung's throat. As for how the two of us are going to interact, I'll give us both some time to think it over. I'll contact you later, so wait for me, okay? It was only right for them to take some time to adjust. After all, eating too much could make a person choke, and all these secrets and feelings were much harder to digest. Fortunately, in the days that followed, He and Xie Qingcheng really didn't have many opportunities to meet alone. And there's a scene break. Damn, I kind of... Whenever they're, like, apart for a period of time, I feel like the book, like, makes me feel like He. Like, I get, like, Xie Qingcheng, what's the word I'm looking for? Not... I don't know why I'm blanking on this word, but anyway, I get where I'm like, oh man, I miss Xie Qingcheng and I miss them, like, being together. Yes, withdrawal. Henry, do not ask me why I could not think of that word right now, because I don't know. Due to the deadly incident on set, filming for the trial was forcibly shut down. That makes sense. It's kind of hard to come back from all that. The film had a large budget, and its investors and producers were all the most powerful figures of their respective fields. To put it harshly, if the victim had been a minor cast member, these cold-blooded, apathetic business people would have been fine with silently wiping away the gory stain so none of this blood would seep into the audience's field of view. But instead, the deceased was Hu Yi. A man of his position and status had unexpectedly met his death in such a bizarre, cruel manner at this film studio. Mr. and Mrs. Hu were both very influential, and Hu Yi was their only son. Overwhelmed with fury and grief, the couple rushed to the scene that very day, nearly upending the entire film crew. In the end, the Hu family matriarch roared at Huang Jilong, tears streaming down her face and teeth bared in rage. "You'll pay for my son's life with your own. I'll make you pay." And apart from Hu Yi, an assistant writer and a production manager from the film crew were still missing. Even now that He had woken up and began to cooperate with the investigation, the status and whereabouts of those two girls were still unknown. When the officer responsible for taking Xie Qingcheng and Yu's statement arrived, his face took on an extremely complicated expression. Were these two born under an unlucky star or something? Why did they keep getting embroiled in the strangest cases of the year? That is the question. That's the question of the series. But the officer was a consummate professional who wouldn't reveal any of his private thoughts. He kept his smart remarks to himself. The investigation team meticulously went over everything that had happened that night, including the appearance of that last worker Xie Qingcheng had seen. A forensics expert created a composite sketch of the suspect based on his description. But since it had been late at night, and Xie Qingcheng hadn't looked closely at the man's face, the finalized portrait was less than ideal. The assistant writer and production manager's families kept wailing and making a fuss outside, throwing the scene into utter chaos. All the police department could do to console them was insist they would solve the case as quickly as possible. And they did need to solve it as quickly as possible. As of now, the two girls were missing, not necessarily dead. If they were still alive, then the sooner they found a lead, the greater their chances of survival. Everything proceeded at a tense, rapid pace. But one question continued to hang over the entire film crew's heads. Why was Hu Yi murdered? We still don't have any inkling to that either. Whom had he crossed? And why had they chosen such a frightful way to murder him? Doubtless these were the questions preying on Huang Jilong's mind right now. In the cast and crew's hotel, Huang Jilong's face was as gray as steel. He sat on the sofa across from Liu Jishu, who looked just as upset. There was no one else in the room. Both these Laoban had placed their phones on the tea table beside a monitoring device, the latest in cutting-edge counter-surveillance technology. Who did you offend? Liu Jishu asked. Who could I possibly have offended? Huang Jilong took a drag on his cigar. These tumultuous last few days had rendered his complexion a waxy yellow. Who do you think I could have offended? You have the face to talk to me like that? Liu Jishu grew agitated. You knew that I had He Yu come here because I wanted you to keep an eye on him for me, for the organization. But look at you. You nearly got him killed. If I hadn't received that reminder from the surveillance AI saying the signal from He Yu's phone had been cut off for over an hour and that I should investigate immediately, the next time I saw him, he would have been a corpse. Well, I guess Liu Jishu sort of saves the day in this situation. And yeah, I feel like we don't have a ton of information about the director yet, but we've heard his name from the organization's people. Like, they've mentioned Huang Jilong before. But it's still extremely vague as to, like, what he's doing with the organization. Forced into an awkward corner by her probing remarks, Huang Jilong said, Since when did Executive Liu become such a caring mother to her son? Me? Care about him? Liu Jishu scoffed. Do you need me to repeat what Executive Duan said? Don't threaten me with Duan Wen. Huang Jilong's eyes were bloodshot. I'm telling you, Liu Jishu, your position in the organization is even lower than mine. Don't think that you can speak to me this way, just because Executive Duan is paying you more attention now you have the blood toxin. You ought to know your place. When he says now that you have the blood toxin, I'm trying to figure out if that's simply referring to He Yu, having He Yu in her control, or is this something that she also has herself? Do you really think that you can hold your seniority over me after this mess? What position could you possibly still have? Liu Jishu let out a tremulous laugh, her plump cheeks quivering. You can go ahead and keep your mouth shut, Huang Jilong. Just wait till Executive Duan knocks on your door and tears you a new one. As if to confirm her words, the moment Liu Jishu finished speaking, Huang Jilong's phone began to ring from where it lay on the tea table between them. The caller ID only showed a single name, glaringly bright. Duan. Ooh. That's the end of the chapter. We are on page 131 for chapter 98, which is called Red High Heels. Liu Jishu and Huang Jilong locked eyes. Both of them saw a wisp of fear in the other's gaze. Since the Huzhou Broadcasting Tower incident, the higher-ups had been working on cutting all ties to the murder cases. All the arrangements that Liu Yuju had made before her death had forced the police investigation across borders, and the foreign scapegoat was already surrounded, only waiting to be sacrificed to close the case. But now this massive incident had occurred during the filming of the trial. It was completely outside anyone's expectations. Hu Yi had been murdered, and his parents would definitely investigate. Huang Jilong knew he had no way to avoid this call. He sucked in a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the trembling of his voice. Executive Duan. Ayo, Executive Huang. The voice emanating from the phone speaker was smooth as silk. The man's tone was as casual as if he was discussing the weather. It's been so long since you've taken the initiative to call me. I couldn't help but give in to the temptation to call you myself. Executive Duan, I didn't mean... The man laughed. I've been thinking about you. I wanted to ask after your well-being. Has Executive Huang been sleeping well lately? Huang Jilong had been in a verbal spar with Liu Jishu just moments ago, but now pea-sized beads of sweat were rolling down his forehead. I heard that your production's been put on hold. Tisk. As a producer with so much on your plate, you finally have a chance to rest. I bet you've been enjoying this rare vacation and sleeping till noon every day. Huang Jilong had no way to respond. Executive Duan laughed, his tone changing abruptly. But unfortunately, while Executive Huang has been sleeping well, I haven't been sleeping well at all. Do you know why? Executive Duan, you must be joking, Huang Jilong stuttered. After an incident like that, I haven't been able to eat or sleep. I've been constantly racking my brain, trying to figure out a way to resolve the situation. Executive Duan snorted. Oh, so you do know that there's something wrong. And here I thought you were sitting at the spa, vacationing on some island somewhere. You went so long without giving me a single call. I practically had to come find you myself. My apologies. I really have been stretched too thin. There's no need to apologize. Executive Duan sounded just as leisurely as always, not a hint of emotion audible in his voice. Executive Huang is a big boss now, so it's only natural that you keep certain business matters from me. I have no interest in asking about them either. I just wonder what sort of deity Executive Huang offended so deeply that they'd kill such a prominent figure on your turf. Executive Duan paused. I also heard that you nearly lost the blood toxin. It sounds like they are talking about He Yu. Executive Duan, we've always been honest with each other. I haven't hidden any of my business from you. Oily sweat dripped from Huang Jilong's nose. I meticulously verify my accounts with you every year. You even have backup files on every worker in my employ. There's no reason for you to suspect me. I wouldn't call it suspecting you, Executive Duan said slowly. I just find it inexplicable. For some bizarre reason, he was dumped in a solvent vat like a film prop. Such a strange way to carry out a murder. I find it hard to believe they just wanted to disrupt a film project. Yes, but I truly have no idea who I could have offended. The cigar between Huang Jilong's fingers burned down. I don't know why things have turned out like this either. Executive Duan laughed. You don't need to be so nervous. Huang Jilong mopped at his sweat. Actually, in terms of seniority, you've been in the organization since long before I took over. You're one of its founders, Executive Duan said placidly. I don't use those I suspect, nor do I suspect those I use. If you say that's how it is, I won't question you. Huang Jilong let out a small breath of relief. But you must know that Mr. Hu is no easy opponent, Executive Duan continued. If they find something in the course of this investigation, I'm sure you're aware of the consequences. There's no need for me to say more. Yes. There are currently no clues leading to the killer who dared to commit murder right under your nose, and neither of us know their ultimate objective. But it takes a careful man to steer a ship for 10,000 years. Don't you agree? Right. Excellent. Since you have a very clear idea of the things you need to act on quickly, as well as the things that you must never do again, I'll leave it at that. Don't give our opponent too much time. Whatever affairs you've been involved in, the traces must be wiped clean as soon as possible. Huang Jilong gave him another string of assents before finally hanging up the phone. Perhaps it was just the sudden disappearance of the light source, but the moment the phone screen turned off, Huang Jilong's waxy pale face seemed especially gloomy and defeated. Liu Jishu leaned against the wall. You'd better hope that everything you said today is the truth. Huang Jilong bared his teeth in a smile, his anxiously bulging eyeballs giving his perfectly normal face an unspeakably twisted quality. Not a single word of what I said was false. After Liu Jishu left, Huang Jilong sprawled out on the chair and covered his eyes with the crook of his arm. In truth, the thought of murder was hardly cause for fear to people like them. After all, they were a group of vicious beasts in human form, licking blood from the tips of their fangs. What frightened him was the fact that they knew absolutely nothing about their adversary. The fact that they could pull off something like this meant that whoever this was, their methods were just as refined as those of their own organization. Ooh, a counter-organization. Could that be? Wonder what their intentions would be in the situation. Furthermore, their choice of Hu Yi as their murder victim meant their standing must be very high. So high that Hu Yi's parents posed no concern to them, even if something had gone awry. When had he ever offended someone like that? Huang Jilong was drawing a blank. He began to question every single one of his secret projects. Had he slipped up somewhere? If there really was a problem with one of his projects, things would be much trickier. And what were his opponent's next steps? Hu Yi was dead, but Huang Jilong hadn't forgotten that the other party still had those two girls. They were workers under his employ, and still missing to this day. People with no background or status had never been anything more than grass underfoot to Huang Jilong. It wouldn't have mattered to him if those two girls died. Even if their parents showed up with protest banners to kneel in front of his offices, he had ways to suppress public outcry. But now, with their insignificant lives bound to his, he had no choice but to agonize over their well-being. He had no idea what the other party was planning to pull using those two girls. After deliberating at length, Huang Jilong picked up his phone again and dialed a number. Hello. Yes, Chief Zhou. How are you? I wanted to ask after the two missing girls. Have you found any clues? And there is a scene break. Yes, blue. So anyways, eat the rich. Yep. At that very moment, at an unknown location in what appeared to be a basement, a girl slowly regained consciousness. When she first opened her eyes, she thought she was still lying on the spring mattress in the film crew's hotel, that everything that had happened before was just a nightmare brought on by the exhaustion of the past few days. But she quickly realized something was wrong. The air was cold and damp, filled with the bitter scent of rotting wood. Fear rapidly filled her eyes, and she glanced around at her surroundings in terror. She wanted to scream, but found her mouth gagged by a strip of cloth, and could only let out a weak groan. Like any animal that had fallen into a trap with a breath of life still left in its body, she began to struggle hysterically. Craning her neck, she found herself locked in a cage just over a meter high, with her hands tied behind her back. Swallowed up by fear, the girl began to recall everything that had happened before she passed out. The man in the baseball hat, the reflection of a cudgel rearing up behind her as she raised her phone to snap a photo, the black hair billowing like seaweed inside the specimen tank as she took a closer look, the realization that it was Hu Laoshe, whom she had been speaking to just hours before, immersed in the cloudy solution, his skin deathly white. Tears started streaming down the girl's face. She was soaked from head to toe in sweat and urine, the consequence of pissing herself in fright. Where was she? What was this place? Outside the cage, she was surrounded by hollow darkness. Where was her friend? Where was Xiaoyang? She kicked her feet in despair, frantically twisting back and forth as she tried to loosen the ropes that bound her. And then, Xiao Jie. She shuddered violently. She turned her head abruptly, but all she saw was a pile of straw lying in the corner of the cage. She grew even more distraught, thinking that her terror had made her lose her mind and start hearing things. The moment she turned away, she heard that voice again. Xiaojie. She whipped her head around once more. The straw moved. There was a child standing outside the cage, she realized, behind the pile of straw. It was a very small boy who looked to be only 5 or 6 years old. But he was neatly dressed in clean clothes, and his hands and feet weren't tied. It didn't look like he was another prisoner. Rather, he seemed more like a child who had snuck into the basement to play. The young woman cried out, tears running down her face. Shh, Xiaojie, don't shout. The boy walked over quietly and craned his neck to look up at the entrance in the basement's ceiling. Then he approached the cage, stood up on his tiptoes, and slowly untied the strip of fabric covering the young woman's mouth. The young woman gasped loudly, taking in huge gulps of air as her lips trembled and her teeth chattered audibly. Where am I? And who are you? Where's Xiaoyang? Where's the girl who was with me? Have you seen her? What are you all trying to do, huh? What are you trying to do? Lower your voice. The boy was young, but he seemed quite precocious. He pressed a finger to his lips. Don't let the aunties and uncles upstairs hear that you're awake. The girl fell silent, perhaps because the boy didn't seem malicious, or possibly because she was too frightened to speak. She shook from head to toe. This is the basement of a big villa, the boy said quietly from beyond the cage. I'm only a child, so I don't know who the grown-ups who've come here are, but I've seen them do bad things. Do bad things? The young woman asked tremulously. What bad things? The boy shook his head wordlessly. Then, have you seen the other girl who was captured and brought here with me? The young woman pressed. I did. Where is she? The little boy pointed at the ground. Downstairs? In the pipes. The young woman stared in horror. She's already dead, the little boy explained. I couldn't save her in time. I didn't have time to think of a way to save her. This kind of thing happens here a lot. The grown-ups told me not to mind it. The little boy's voice sounded abnormally rational. It was entirely inappropriate given the circumstances, but there were times when the human mind acted of its own accord. The young woman inexplicably recalled a photograph. This is not something I would have thought would be referenced here, but okay. Taken at Auschwitz during World War II, it featured a German boy walking down the street, past a massive pile of dead Jewish refugees on the side of the road. The boy had an incredibly indifferent, calm expression on his face. The child's heart must have become insensate and numb. He displayed no astonishment toward death, walking by as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The boy standing before her seemed to be the same. Fresh fear struck the young lady, who was already scared out of her wits. Only after shuddering for a good while did she manage to squeeze some words out of her throat. In a voice distorted by panic, she said, Xiao Didi, can you please let me out? Please, I'm begging you. I'm an only child. My parents. She shook even more violently, her teeth knocking against each other. My parents won't be able to handle it. Please find a way. Don't be scared, the boy said softly. I came to find a way to save you. They've captured so many people that they'll sometimes forget about them. I've secretly let a few of them go. They still don't suspect me because I'm just a little kid. As he spoke, the boy took out a small key and focused his attention on opening the door to the cage. Jie, There's a small corridor connected to this basement. Just keep walking forward to escape. Oh, right. And take this. It's a blueprint of the villa. I've marked the safest path to the exit for you. Yeah, I wonder if we can trust him or if he's working with them and leading her into a trap. But there is a possibility that he is so weirdly rational and adult-like because he has witnessed these things and he's not on their side and he is really trying to help her. And he's just creepy. The young woman hastily accepted the document. She was so terrified that she had completely lost her ability to reason or any semblance of calm. She didn't realize how completely nonsensical her present situation was. And yeah, Blue, that's a good point. Also, what if he has PE? Which would make sense and might explain why he's here. She didn't... Oh, I read that already. Her entire mind was filled only with the word survival, which crowded out every last bit of her rationality. She grabbed the blueprint in a panic and looked down at the little boy, her eyes filled with gratitude. Ooh. There's art. There's art. There's art I don't like, but we're gonna get to that after I read this page. Thank you. Thank you so much. The little boy smiled back with his hands clasped behind him, the picture of docility. You're welcome, Jijie. Go quickly now. The young woman staggered away, losing one of her shoes as she ran toward her escape. The boy remained standing next to the cage, watching her figure recede into the distance until she was finally swallowed up by the heavy darkness. Some time later, the trapdoor in the basement ceiling creaked open. A beam of warm yellow light spilled down, and a man who appeared to be a housekeeper stepped into the basement. He walked up to the boy. However, he didn't speak the way the boy did, as the housekeeper wasn't his father. Instead, he bowed very respectfully toward the child. We finished setting up the game. The player has already walked into surveillance range as indicated on the blueprint. Oh, great. The boy beamed. Let's go upstairs and play then. He followed the housekeeper back up as he spoke, leaving the gloomy basement behind. The basement's trapdoor was engraved with a picture of a cat toying with its prey. For cats, the thrill of the hunt didn't stem from the death of the prey itself, but rather from their prey's terror as it faced its imminent demise. The boy walked into a brightly lit hall. Here, the light was brilliant enough to throw his face and outfit into sharp relief. His face was very delicate, nearly breathtakingly so. He was dressed very neatly, but there was something about his outfit that was extremely bizarre. His shoes. On his tiny feet, he wore a pair of pint-sized, custom-made red high heels. I was really thinking that this chapter title referred to, what's her name? The woman from the organization who's like one of the main people and she wears the red high heels, right? I wasn't thinking someone else would be wearing them. Okay, we're gonna look at the art now. And it says game start. And there he is, looking astonishingly creepy with his little game remote thing and his high heels. This is the most concerning art so far in this book series to me. It was a truly disturbing combination. A 5 or 6-year-old boy with a pair of women's high heels on his feet. Entirely adult in style, yet shrunken down to a child's size. Blue, yes, he also kind of looks like Hoyu, but that might be artist same face syndrome. See, that's my problem here, and like with this artist, there isn't a ton of like variation in the character faces for the most part. So I'm like, but at the same time, I am like, is he secretly related to Hoyu? Like, what is going on? High heels clacking. The little boy walked over to the tea table in the hall and turned to look at the large image being projected onto the wall. The young woman he had just set free was already visible on the highly detailed projection. She had walked into the elaborate, labyrinthine system of paths, anxiety and fear written vividly across her face. The boy watched for a while, utterly engrossed, before stepping forward and picking up a device that resembled a portable game console, eyes still fixed on the screen. Smiling, he pressed a button with his soft little hand. Let the game begin. And that's the end of the chapter. We're getting through a lot of chapters today. I'm gonna read the next one and then we're gonna take our break. We are on page 143 for chapter 99. Can I come over to your place for New Year's? So I think we're shifting back to Heyu and Xie Ching for a little bit. And with Meat Bun doing her thing, who knows, and we will come back to the situation with the game. It was the last day before the cast and crew dispersed. Xie Ching was gathering his things in his room. Halfway through, a greeting card slipped out of a pile of miscellaneous items. He picked up the card to see some well wishes written on it, and remembered that it had been given to him by the young assistant writer the day he joined the production. The girl was around the same age as Xie Xue and very innocent and kind-hearted. When Xie Ching had joined the production, even though the broadcasting tower incident hung over him like a dark cloud, she hadn't treated him differently from anyone else. But now her whereabouts were a mystery, and no one even knew if she was dead or alive. There was also the other missing girl. Xie Ching hadn't interacted with her much, but her sincerity was apparent from the way she treated people. Xie Ching sat down with the card in his hand and looked out at the drifting snow beyond his window. Jiang Lanpei, Liu Yuju, these two innocent girls who'd gone missing. He couldn't be certain whether the same criminal organization was behind all of these cases, but either way, he had truly encountered too many deaths this year. To overcome his mental illness, Xie Ching had tamped down practically all of his emotional fluctuations, leaving him cold and stiff. He valued life, but he had given up the ability to grieve its loss. Even the feeling of disappointment was too heavy for him to permit himself. But now, even though Xie Ching was reluctant to admit it, and perhaps because of the near-death experience and the secrets he'd finally shared after so many years guarding them alone, his emotional state seemed to have shifted slightly. He didn't feel quite the same as before. It was as if his heart held an expanse of dense, dark ink. Sharing the truth had been like pouring in a cup of water. The darkness had yet to dissipate, but it seemed somewhat diluted. He could finally breathe again, at least a little. Xie Ching closed his eyes. He had done some soul-searching over the past few days, and he could confirm that his emotions had loosened up slightly. It made him feel vaguely regretful. Xie Ching doing some soul-searching? Okay. Liyu's words had been harsh, but everything he said was true. Now that he had shared his secrets, it was impossible for them to simply go back to the way things used to be. In all likelihood, they would never be able to disentangle themselves from each other again. Xie Ching sighed. He was finding it difficult to calm down. He had pretty much finished packing by now, and it was already past 10 o'clock at night. But unfortunately, he couldn't fall asleep. And so he opened the bottle of red wine that had been given to him when he joined the production. He had been planning to bring it home, but after thinking it over, he figured he might as well drink some of it now to ease his anxiety. The wine was excellent, sweet and rich on the tongue. As he drained the glasses he poured out, he found himself getting rather tipsy. Oh Lord, oh dear. Although Xie Ching-chung could hold his liquor, his body processed alcohol very poorly. Drinking quickly sapped him of his strength, and although his mind remained clear, he couldn't avoid the accompanying physical sluggishness. Warmth began to dissolve into his veins. Clutching the wine glass in one hand, he lay back against the hotel's reclining chair in exhaustion. He felt calm, but within that calmness was a deep melancholy. The more he drank, the warmer he felt. Casting his slightly reddened eyes downward and raising a hand to rub at his temple. He was just about to stand and go wash up when he heard a key card unlocking the door. There were so many things he needed to take care of for the police investigation, and so he'd spent the past few days back at the hotel. And despite his soft, wine-soaked haze, he knew very well who had the authority to obtain his key card from the front desk and open his door. I still don't understand how they give anyone that, but okay. I mean, other than, like, a hotel worker themselves. But, you know, sure. Torn between impatience from the relentless nagging, resentment from telling the truth, and irritation at his inability to come up with an adequate solution despite days of consideration, Xie Chingcheng glared at the person who had entered his room, a cocktail of all those emotions simmering in his chest. But perhaps all the wine had left his gaze so soaked with liquor that it no longer held its usual sharp edge. He Yu didn't notice a hint of Xie Chingcheng's sour mood. Yeah, I know He Yu has the rich kid card. He had come to ask Xie Chingcheng what time he intended to depart the next day, and truly hadn't expected to find a mildly drunk Xie Chingcheng the moment he walked into the room. Xie Chingcheng stilled for a moment, then stood up, his faintly red eyes still clear and bright. His body was straight as a ruler. He watched He Yu in the entryway for a moment. Then, "Please get out," he said. After a moment of shock, He Yu figured out why Xie Chingcheng was drinking alone in his room. He looked at him with a complicated expression, then closed the door behind him. "Xie Chingcheng, I'm asking you to please get out." "Xiege, there's no need for you to be so polite with me." Xie Chingcheng looked at him in silence. It wasn't politeness, it was cold distance. Actually, ever since they escaped the jaws of death, his mind had been in turmoil. He hadn't realized at first just how much he regretted telling He Yu those truths. It had taken him a few days to process. But once things settled down and he had time to think the matter through, his regret had only grown. But he was certain now that he needed He Yu to understand that while, yes, he had shared his history as the psychological Ebola patient, the first emperor, he could only ever have revealed those secrets on the brink of death. For the Xie Chingcheng who had returned to the land of the living, it was imperative that he draw clear boundaries between himself and He Yu. Good luck with doing that. None of this would change his attitude toward He Yu. He had to make sure that He Yu understood this. It was interesting because I feel like in a way we don't have a clear idea what Xie Chingcheng's feelings about He Yu actually are. Like that's intentional, of course, but it's like something about the way, like when the story is being narrated in his perspective, there's still a distance. Like we get his feelings about things that He Yu does, And I'm sure, yeah, Blue, like you said, I think he doesn't either, at least not fully. That's definitely part of it, is like, well, he's not totally aware of what those feelings are either. But, like, we never get a clear, like, what he feels about Yu as a person. At least I don't feel like we do. It's always just kind of like, well, I gotta put up this boundary and da da da. But, like, so here where it said, none of this would change his attitude toward Yu, I'm like, what is your attitude toward Yu? He had to make sure that Yu understood this. You've drunk so much. Were you upset about something tonight? Unfortunately, the young man didn't seem to understand, and ignored his aloof attempt to turn his visitor out. Yu walked up to him, his body shrouded in cold night air. He had a plastic bag in his hand. Let's sit down and talk. I brought you some hot cocoa tea. Xie Qingcheng was speechless. Yu really was a child. Who wanted to drink hot cocoa tea? Stuff like that made his throat feel like it was coated in sugar. Xie Qingcheng walked over with a cold expression on his face, lifted a hand, and slammed it into the wall behind Yu. His eyes were faintly damp beneath his mussed hair. Get out. But Yu suddenly reached out and hugged him. The heat was blasting inside, so Xie Qingcheng was only wearing a thin lounge shirt made of smooth, satiny silk. He could feel the young man's breath through the light material. Xie Qingcheng sobered up at once. To avoid waking the people in the adjacent rooms, he kept his voice low. His breath was hot from the wine, but his tone was cold. Are you done? But this time, Yu didn't actually do anything to him. To Xie Qingcheng's surprise, Yu only pushed him against the entryway wall and held him, head buried in the crook of his neck as he breathed. It was different from the way he'd vented his surging desire before. It was even different from the scorching need he'd felt in the hospital ward after coming back from the brink of death. This was the first time he had seen Xie Qingcheng since reflecting on everything he'd learned, and he held him like he was embracing another living being like himself. This was the last person on Earth who could truly empathize with him. The production crew will be disbanded tomorrow. Silence. Don't worry, I've already thought it over. No matter what happens, I won't tell anyone else about the things you told me. Yu might have been young, but when he wanted to speak with Xie Qingcheng sincerely, he was more than up to the task. His bearing was perfectly steady. He kept hugging the man in his arms as he spoke. He found Xie Qingcheng's body very peculiar. It was clearly full of masculine strength, muscles wiry yet well developed and not weak by any means. But as he touched him through his clothes, he couldn't help but feel that the fabric was too thick, while Xie Qingcheng was too thin. So thin that he was like smoke, or a disembodied spirit, and thus impossible to grasp. Yu couldn't help reaching out to touch him, to stave off the panic in his heart. It was a frailty that made it seem like he could disappear at any moment. Oof. He hugged Xie Qingcheng just like that, rocking back and forth in place a few times, dredging up a false impression of tenderness, like he was afraid of losing something. Now, who says it was a false impression of tenderness? Was it false? Yu closed his eyes. Before coming here, he had already spent a long time mulling things over. But at this moment, he once again thought of all those things from the past. The scar on Xie Qingcheng's wrist, the secrets in his heart, and everything that had happened between them. Finally, he thought about how, after today, they would leave this place and return to Huzhou. After that, Xie Qingcheng would definitely never willingly seek him out again. That's an interesting thought, too, because I wonder if that's actually true. He felt a strange twinge in his heart, as if something was tugging on it. It was an extremely uncomfortable feeling. I'll keep your secrets, he finally said softly into Xie Chingchung's ear, his tone unexpectedly docile, like he was beseeching him. However, let me say this up front. After you get back, don't spend any more time alone with Chen Man. Xie Qingcheng pushed him. Stop being mental. Liu smiled. He really was being mental. He'd just spoken so imploringly, yet now his eyes darkened again as he grabbed Xie Qingcheng by the wrist, revealing a section of his pale gray tattoo with a stroke of his fingers. Not again. Xie Qingcheng thought that perhaps he needed a teething stick. Why else would he be so fond of gnawing on him? Sure enough, Yu bit down on Xie Qingcheng's tattoo, but this time, he didn't draw blood. He said, if you insist on spending time alone with him, then fine. Just don't let me see the two of you together. You're my kin, so don't get too close to other people. After all the thinking you've done these past few days, this is the way you've decided to interact with me? That's my last word, Yu said. He doesn't know. Xie Qingcheng is his teething stick. Xie Qingcheng suddenly jerked free of Yu's hand. Then, right before Yu's eyes, he pulled out a disinfecting wipe, swiped it over his wrist, and tossed it in Yu's face. Fuck off. But Yu hugged him even more insistently. Burying his face in the crook of Xie Qingcheng's neck, he nuzzled him gently with the tip of his nose. Drunk on red wine, the man burned unusually hot. Yu knew if he were to take what he wanted from Xie Qingcheng right now, the feeling would be unlike anything he'd ever experienced before. But he didn't do it. Character development, I guess. In his free time these past few days, he had indeed carefully examined his thoughts and come up with a brand new idea. His feelings were different now, even compared to what he felt in the hospital room. He just barely escaped with his life back then, and the joy of surviving the disaster drove him to impatiently seek out warmth and softness from Xie Qingcheng's body. His ardor had been completely impulsive, like a reflexive habit left over from his past behavior. But it wasn't the same anymore. Although the words he spoke were as cutting as ever, whenever he thought of how many years Xie Qingcheng had spent alone, whenever he thought of the tattoo on Xie Qingcheng's wrist and how it was actually a self-inflicted scar, just like his own, precipitated by the depths of his misery and helplessness, he felt a soft ache in his cold, shadowy heart. That feeling became a knot that bound him in place. He still didn't like Xie Qingcheng. But there was no one like Xie Qingcheng. The fact that he had never chosen Yu was painful. But when Yu regarded him as another psychological Ebola patient, he could understand what he'd been through. Yu didn't think that the new feeling he developed for Xie Qingcheng was necessarily pity. But at the very least, he didn't want to hurt this person anymore. And so he didn't overstep any boundaries. He just hugged Xie Qingcheng for a long, long time, even though Xie Qingcheng still refused to hug him back. This was the first time since they'd first slept together that they parted on peaceful terms. Yu's eyes were deeply overcast when he left, but in the end he held himself back. I've thought it over, Xie Qingcheng. From now on, I won't force you to do anything that you don't want to do. You can think of it as my way of saying thank you for telling me the truth. I won't torment you anymore. I won't make you do those things anymore. So you don't need to be scared. This is crazy. I'm reading And then it takes a minute, and then I'm processing, like, this is really happening, and we're only in volume 4 out of 10, and this is already happening. Xie Jingcheng's body smelled of alcohol, but his eyes were as clear and chilly as thin ice. Still, there seemed to be a touch of rouge frozen beneath the ice, suffusing it with a soft blush. Is it just from the wine, or is it from something else? We don't know. You think far too highly of yourself, Xie Qingcheng said mildly. I've never been afraid of you. I just found those experiences disgusting. Yu was speechless. If you're really not planning on doing anything, why did you come to my room? After a moment of contemplation, it seemed that Yu really couldn't remember why he'd come. Nothing really, he said. I'm leaving now. Hmm. Xie Qingcheng. Hmm? Before I go, can you hug me back? Just once? Oh, that hit me. Okay. Xie Qingcheng closed those dark eyes that seemed to glimmer with stars. I already told you, he said indifferently. As far as I'm concerned, our relationship isn't going to change just because you know my secrets. That's still my stance. Silence. Please leave. The old Yu would never have just left. But this time, he simply stared at Xie Qingcheng for a while. In the end, he didn't speak again, seeming as though he'd already said everything that he wanted to say. In the past, he'd had plenty of ill intent that could have sparked to life and spurred him to entangle shamelessly with Xie Qingcheng. But after several days of contemplation, he felt like most of that ill intent had been yanked out of his chest. He knew Xie Qingcheng had abandoned him, knew that he never factored into any of Xie Qingcheng's decisions. Well, that's not true. But now that he'd learned the whole truth, it was very difficult to feel that Xie Qingcheng had betrayed his expectations. Betrayal was an act carried out by normal people. Trapped within this maelstrom, Xie Qingcheng had long since abandoned his identity as a normal person. Xie Qingcheng didn't even want himself anymore. Why in the world would that change for Yu? Even though Yu was still hurt, he could understand. So when Xie Qingcheng once again told him to leave, he really did go. The hot cocoa tea that Yu brought over still sat on the table. Xie Qingcheng practically collapsed on the bed in exhaustion, lifting an arm to cover his eyes. He could feel Yu's residual heat lingering on his body. It was very warm. But Xie Qingcheng didn't want it. He had been in hell for far too long. He had never gotten over the deaths of his parents or Lao Qin. Having lived for so long among the dead, he was no longer accustomed to how it felt to stand so close to the living. It was better for him to remain alone. See, that's just a little tiny smidgen, a little inkling that makes me think that Xie Qingcheng, I mean, he's suppressing so much, but I feel like part of his thought process is like, even if he wants to be close to Yu, he's like, I'm better off alone. So it's not like, I don't want Yu here. It's like, I'm better off alone, and that's like the reason. It's, I feel like Meat Bun is really good at giving like tiny, tiny slivers of like what the very repressed person is like actually feeling. There's like little tiny hints, and you have to think about it, and then you're like, wait a minute, what are you saying, and what are you like not saying? Alone with his weariness and turbulent thoughts, Xie Qingcheng slept until the sun hung high in the sky the next morning. When he returned to Huzhou, he was naturally in for another round of torment. Zheng Jingfeng, Chen Man, Auntie Li, Xie Xue, out of concern for him, All of them came to ask for a full account of what had happened. Although Xie Qingcheng didn't have much patience, he still explained everything to them one by one. Sorry, I have to pause again because I'm just thinking about how relatable that is. Like, if you've ever been in a situation where, like, something happens and then you, like, have people who are concerned for you, but then it's like all of a sudden everyone is like, oh my God, what happened? Like, talk to me about this. And you're like, oh, I don't want to, like, expend more energy towards this topic, but then you have to. And it's out of their concern for you, but you're just like, oh God, I don't want to do this. That's relatable, Xie Jingcheng. Of course, what they learned was only the tip of the iceberg. The only two people who knew the full story of what had happened at the film studio were He Yu and himself. Meanwhile, true to his word, He Yu stopped forcing Xie Qingcheng to do those things with him. Although the youth's desire was certainly abundant, and he couldn't hide the molten heat in his eyes, He Yu had always felt more protective and compassionate toward the mentally ill than the average person. He saw them as his kin, so naturally, he wouldn't add to their persecution. At first, Xie Qingcheng had assumed that He Yu's words were just idle talk, but he soon discovered that He Yu really was acting just as he said he would. In that respect, he truly was a gentleman of his word. Then there's a scene break. The end of the year arrived in the blink of an eye. On a day not long before New Year's Eve, Xie Qingcheng received a message from He Yu. My parents are busy and need to go back to Yanzhou, though this time they asked me to go with them. But I don't want to go, so I told them no. There was a long pause, as if He Yu was waiting for Xie Qingcheng's reply. But Xie Qingcheng didn't respond, so he finally sent the last message. I don't want to be by myself. Can I come over to your place for the holiday? I'm going to very carefully turn the page and put my bookmark there and tell you the chapter title without looking at the first lines so that I don't see what the response is, because I've got to take a break. And when we come back, we will be... Oh, goodness. Okay. We will be on page 155 for chapter 100, which is called... Why is she allowed to come over to your place for New Year's? So it's not Shenman. I don't know if it's Xie Xue or it's someone else. But I don't know. I want Xie Qingcheng to say yes. I think part of my feelings right now, like reading this book, I'll get frustrated with Xie Qingcheng, and I'm like, just do this thing, just be more open with He Yu, just like, da-da-da-da, don't, like, basically abandon him again. And then I stop and I think about, like, what if the things that had happened in real life? And of course, in real life, I would be like, stay the fuck away from that person. But because it's a story, I'm just like, oh, baby, He Yu. Oh, blue. Okay, you're holding your tongue. You have a good idea of who it could be. Okay. Yeah, I have no idea, honestly. I'm very curious. I'm gonna take about a 10-minute break, and yep, like I said, when we come back, we will be on chapter 100. Hello, I am back. Henry, you were saying, I keep wondering what the accursed chapter number will be here, like the number we remember and hate. I feel like, well, there's definitely going to be one. There's possibly going to be more than one, knowing Meat Bun. Yeah, Blue, I bet it'll be within the last 50 chapters or so. I feel like there's going to be one within, like, the last 50 chapters, and maybe there will also be, like, a lesser one, like, a little bit earlier. Who knows? I don't know. I could see that happening a lot. So the YouTube preview for the stream takes so long to catch up with where I'm at, so hopefully, yes, okay. You can see and hear me, judging from Blue saying welcome back. That's good, because right now it's still showing me my slideshow. So we are on page 155 for chapter 100. Why is she allowed to come over to your place for New Year's? He Yu couldn't say why he wanted to go to Xie Qingcheng's place for the holiday. Now, with the hatred between them wiped clean and their entanglement ended, whatever debts there had been between Xie Qingcheng and himself ought to be settled. Before leaving the film production, he'd even made a solemn vow that moving forward, he would stop forcing Xie Qingcheng to do anything that he didn't want to. In frank terms, that meant that he would no longer demand that Xie Qingcheng continue with their affair. Previously, when the two of them were alone together, most of their interactions had consisted of physical communication rather than verbal. Now that their physical relations had ended, Xie Qingcheng ought to have been much less attractive to He Yu. And yet, he only wanted to see him more. Perhaps the secret only known to the two of them had tied them tightly together. He Yu didn't know. He kept refreshing his phone, checking his messages every few minutes over the course of the day. Xie Qingcheng didn't respond to his message. After an entire day, he still hadn't responded to him. Xie Qingcheng's rejection of his request was self-evident. He had no intention of spending the holiday with He Yu. But He Yu didn't give up. At around 9 o'clock in the evening, he finally couldn't resist giving Xie Qingcheng a call. Did you see my message? He Yu. What message? Unexpectedly, the voice on the other end was Xie Xue. Okay, my first thought was that it was Xie Xue. My second thought was like, what if it's this other girl, and it just sort of throws us for a loop. A year ago, He Yu I can read. He Yu never could have imagined a day when he'd feel so disappointed to hear Xie Xue's voice. Hand the phone to Professor Xie. There's something I need to discuss with him. Professor Xie is taking a shower, Xie Xue said, annoyed. If there's something you need to say, You can tell your Xie Laoshe, too. Shower. The image rose unbidden to He Yu's mind. Xie Qingcheng standing beneath the shower head, with his broad shoulders and long legs, his narrow waist and slender frame, and that gorgeous spot of red cinnabar on the base of his neck, on the back of his neck. A spark of warmth flickered to life in his heart. Hello? Xie Shui prompted him when he didn't reply. Hello? Why aren't you speaking? He Yu did his best to sound calm and indifferent. I really do have something that I need to talk to him about. Give him the phone and get him on the line. In that case, wait a bit and call him back later. It's urgent. Xie Shui was out of options. She pattered over to the bathroom in her slippers, opened the door a crack, and turned her head away as she reached her hand in. Guh, you have an urgent call. Over the phone, He Yu heard the splashing sound of the shower head and the low voice of a man speaking in response. He imagined the scene, pictured the sight of the man dripping with glimmering water droplets as he reached out to accept the phone. He suddenly felt as though the steam from the shower was drifting through the phone line, warming his face. There was a slight rustle of movement from the other end of the line. Then Xie Qingcheng's voice said, Hello? Xie Qingcheng. He Yu's throat tightened. He felt simultaneously overwhelmed by lust at the thought of the man showering and choked by his pointed disregard. There's something urgent you need to discuss with me? You're feeling unwell? He Yu sucked in a breath as he glanced down. I don't know if this counts as feeling unwell, though I do feel rather uncomfortable. Silence. If Xie Qingcheng had been the type to browse the internet, he would have known that the appropriate response to He Yu's answer was, What a load of nonsense. But he wasn't, so he asked, Where do you feel uncomfortable? He Yu really wanted to have phone sex with him, but he remembered the promise he had just made. He could only say, my heart feels uncomfortable. You never responded to my message. The other end of the phone went silent for a good long while. Then, in a plainly disgruntled voice, Xie Qingcheng said, That's what your urgent call is about? Can I come to your house to spend New Year's with you? He Yu asked in lieu of an answer. That's inappropriate. But New Year's should be celebrated with family. I'm not your relative. You should return to Yanzhou with your parents. Silence. I'm hanging up. Xie Qingcheng really did hang up at once. He Yu didn't even have time to make up a nonsense excuse to redeem himself before he was treated to the blaring of the busy tone. Tossing aside his phone, He Yu sank into despondency once more. In the Xie family home in Moyu Alley, Xie Qingcheng walked out of the bathroom, dressed in a bathrobe and toweling his dripping black hair. He had a grim expression in his eyes. Xie Shui bit on the straw of her yogurt drink. Guh, why was he looking for you? What's the emergency? Nothing. He was just looking for trouble. What a nutcase. Did he disrespect you or talk back to you? No. Why so many questions? Xie Shui pursed her lips. Because whenever you're with him, something awful happens. I still don't get how the two of you ended up trapped in that flooded studio. Why is he always clinging to you? It's not like you're his babysitter. How many times have I told you that girls should speak with restraint? Xie Qingcheng asked with a cool face. Also, it's almost 10. Wash up and go to bed. Ugh, sir, your sister is an adult. Under the weight of her brother's oppressive glare, Xie Shui acquiesced, finished her yogurt drink with chagrin, and went to wash up. New Year's Eve arrived in the blink of an eye. On the last day of the year, Xie Qingcheng and Xie Shui finished cleaning the house together, then began putting up lanterns and banners and setting the table with their neighbors. The residents of Moyu Alley would be eating dinner together at a long table this year. It was made up of a dozen or so smaller tables lined up end to end down the long tongue, with each of the neighbors preparing their own specialty dishes. Only neighborhoods where the residents got along well would spend the holiday together like this. Uncle Liu brought out his TV and propped it up at the highest spot at the end of the table to play the New Year's Gala, just like how they used to watch the women's volleyball championships back in the 80s. Seeing this, a little kid dissolved into giggles, got his projector, and cast the image directly onto a screen. Uncle, we can watch like this now. Li Miaoqing walked out with a peepaw in her arms. She had spent her youth working in a nightclub, and back then, all of the girls were required to learn a musical instrument. Sitting on a short stool, she plucked the strings with a twist of her fingers, and played several Suzhou Pingtan pieces with a smile. A little girl approached her to ask if she could play the theme song from a cartoon. In response, Li Miaoqing put on her reading glasses and began to search for the sheet music online. Dr. Xie, there isn't enough cabbage for the dumplings. Can you drive me to the market before it closes tonight? We need more flour, too. Xie Qingcheng couldn't ignore the uncles and aunties' requests, so after he was finished with the task at hand, he grabbed his car keys and took one of the neighborhood aunties to the market to pick out her cabbage. He never expected that on the drive back, he would run into someone at the entrance of Moyu Alley. I'm shocked. I did not see it coming. My goodness, there's still someone eating beef vermicelli at the roadside stall on a day like this? It wasn't Xie Qingcheng who first noticed him, but rather the auntie looking around from the passenger seat, staring intently out the window with her eyes wide open like a bullfrog. There were a handful of cheap food stalls at the entrance of their Longtong, most of which had already closed for the day. There was only a lone Huainan beef soup stall still braving the cold wind. The boss lady of that establishment was a miser whose greatest passion in life was making money. She firmly believed that as long as she remained open tonight, even when CCTV began broadcasting "Tonight is Unforgettable," there would still be customers coming to patronize her beef noodle soup stall. And there is a footnote. "Tonight is Unforgettable" is traditionally the final song performed during the CCTV New Year's Gala. How could she possibly close up shop on New Year's Eve? And look, her faith was being rewarded. Here was a customer, just as expected. Xie Qingcheng stopped the car and looked outside, only to see He Yu sitting at a greasy little table on the side of the road, sipping slowly at some hot beef vermicelli soup. Fucking unbelievable. He didn't even have a flatbread to go with his meal. That's so funny to me as for like a thought coming from Xie Qingcheng, fucking unbelievable, and it's just he didn't even have a flatbread with his food, Sitting alone on the street corner, the perfectly well-behaved young man seemed utterly doleful as he slurped his noodles. What older auntie could look at him without feeling curious or distressed on his behalf? The auntie sitting in Xie Qingcheng's passenger seat was no exception. Dr. Xie, let's go ask this boy if he needs help. There's no need. Look at how well-dressed he is. Ah, yeah. Just because he's well-dressed doesn't mean the child's heart is free of worries. Wasn't there something in the newspaper the other day about a Fuer Dai who committed suicide because his parents didn't give him enough love and attention? I forget if this book has had a footnote about this term, but I know that Fuer Dai is it's young, wealthy people. I forget if they're kind of newly rich or if they're old money. It's one or the other, but it's kind of young, rich people who are kind of just screwing around. If society were just a bit more caring, there wouldn't be so many heartbreaking incidents. If you don't want to bother, then I'll do it. I'll go and ask. The auntie made to open the door. Rendered helpless by her impatient nagging, Xie Qingcheng sighed. All right, auntie. Don't be so hasty. You get out of the car and warm up in the house first. I know him, so I'll go ask him, all right? Satisfied, the auntie returned to the alley, clutching a bunch of cabbages and meat to her stout body. But before stepping out of sight, something occurred to her, and she called back to Xie Jingcheng, who was in the middle of locking his car. "Since you know that boy, you might as well ask him to stay for dinner." Xie Jingcheng was angry beyond words. He stalked over to the Huainan beef soup stall with a dark expression. The money-grubbing boss lady asked, "And what would you like to eat today, handsome?" "I'm just here to talk to this guy." The boss lady was affronted, but it wasn't like she could strong-arm him into buying anything. She left with a huff of indignation. Xie Qingcheng walked over to He Yu's little table, watching as he took tiny sips of clear soup broth with his softly curved lashes lowered. "I can speak." "I'm surprised a young master like you hasn't choked to death from drinking beef soup on New Year's Eve." Glancing up, He Yu feigned a shocked expression. "Ah, Dr. Xie." Xie Qingcheng gave him a look. "I spent a lot of time looking for a place to eat, but all the other restaurants are closed. Am I in your way?" Xie Qingcheng had no desire to waste his breath on him. He Yu had a housekeeper and a chef at home, and the He family had sizable investments in a number of high-end restaurants in the city. In what world did He Yu need to sit in the cold wind and slurp beef soup with meat sliced thinner than paper? He was obviously doing this on purpose. However, his despicable methods were highly effective. The delicious aroma of the New Year's Eve banquet had already begun to drift out of Moyu Alley. Every now and then, some children or older folk would come wandering out, and at a glance they could all see the lonely young man drinking his soup on the drafty street corner. He was much too eye-catching. While they were drinking merrily at the long table in the alley, young Master He was eating outside, exposed to the cold and the wind. It was really quite an effective guilt trip about the disparity between the haves and the have-nots. For while they were feasting to their heart's content, this poor fellow was freezing to death by the roadside. Of course, Xie Qingcheng couldn't let He Yu silently ruin the festive mood of the entire neighborhood. He stood there for a while, then growled menacingly, "Get up, pay your bill, and follow me." The neighborhood feast had already begun. Surprisingly, the filthy rich young Master He was completely satisfied to find a place of refuge at this plentiful but humble feast. His bearing was self-effacing and gentle, like that of a modest gentleman, and he quickly became a well-liked guest at the long table. Xie Shui rolled her eyes, and Xie Qingcheng ignored him, but everyone else piled food on his plate and poured wine into his cup. "Ah, Xiaohe, why are you spending the holiday alone?" "My parents are too busy with work." "What a poor child." "Xiaohe, how old are you?" "Almost 20. "Oh, do you have a girlfriend?" "Let me tell you, I have a very beautiful niece. She's in her second year of university and studying acting in Yanzhou." The auntie rambled on warmly. Of course, she wasn't the only one who wanted to put forward the girls and their family to He Yu. Soon he was surrounded by a circle of aunties and grannies. "My daughter lives in France, but she'll be coming home very soon. She's a bit older than you, but she's young at heart and very pretty. Let me show you a picture. My niece is half Chinese and half Japanese. Her eyes are bright and shiny, and she is charming as can be. These girls' pictures don't count for much. They can be photoshopped after all. But I have a video here. Xiaohe, take a look and see if you're interested." "Psh, stinky old lady, your video could be edited too, okay?" Half joking and half serious, the neighbors quickly started bickering. He Yu smiled. "They're all great, but I just got my heart broken and I haven't gotten over it yet." Hearing this, the women only doted on him even more. "Ah, yo, it's really hard to find such a devoted young man these days. What kind of girl could be so picky that she wouldn't like you?" He Yu smiled again, lowering his lashes. "I suppose I'm just not good enough." Oh, he knows what he's doing. Xie Qingzheng listened from the side, his face drawn so taut that he didn't know what kind of expression he was wearing. He turned his gaze to the large screen and impassively ate some dumplings, watching a dance performance from the gala that expanded in a profusion of colors, like paints spilled from an artist's palette. To be honest, just thinking about it made him annoyed. It was true that He Yu had gotten his heart broken. Xie Qingcheng had personally witnessed it himself from beginning to end. He still didn't know the identity of the girl that He Yu had been secretly in love with. But if He Yu had liked her so much, something must have happened if he refused to speak of her afterward. I don't think that's what He Yu was hinting at in this situation. Although, but I was going to say, although who knows, because they're both repressing their feelings, He Yu and Xie Qingcheng, so He Yu might not even know who he's really talking about. It would have been fine if he had merely avoided mentioning her, but He Yu had completely abandoned himself to despair and homosexuality. I abandoned myself to despair and homosexuality. Oh my god. Oh, that's a line. Okay. Likewise, it would have been fine if he merely wanted to turn to homosexuality, but his partner had been Xie Qingcheng himself. Xie Qingcheng sat there pondering indifferently for a while, feeling increasingly uncomfortable as time went on. Eventually, he decided he might as well remove himself from the situation. So he went to the Longtong's communal kitchen to help boil more dumplings. Unfortunately, there were already plenty of aunties and uncles bustling about in the kitchen. They declared that he would only get in the way and quickly chased him back out again. And so Xie Qingcheng had no choice but to sit back down in his seat and continue eating his New Year's dinner with an apathetic expression on his face. Before he could pick up his chopsticks again, though, he noticed a small dough figurine sitting next to his plate. At first, he thought that it was a toy that a child had put here and forgotten to take with them. Upon taking a closer look, however, he saw that the dough had been sculpted into a pair of tiny dragons with lively whiskers and claws. They were very cute and quite endearing. I saw them on the street when I was on my way here and bought a couple, He Yu said with a smile as he leaned over. They're for you. But, Henry, blood emojis for blood toxin in chat if you completely abandon yourself to despair and homosexuality. Oh, no, this is so cute. Oh my god. And yeah, I really need that on a shirt too. I can see that there's art, like, on the next page, and I'm like, I really need to see these dragons. Oh my god, hi, Christy. Everyone say hi to Christy, my girlfriend is here. I love you too. Cute things are happening for once in this story, Christy, that never happens. Where was I? What do you mean? Is this a children's toy? Asked the straight man. He Yu sighed, suppressing the urge to roll his eyes. Xie Qingcheng, dough figurines are a traditional craft. You ought to learn how to appreciate art. Why a pair of dragons? He Yu's smile vanished. He sat up straight with his face seemingly blank, but upon closer examination, clear unhappiness had suddenly appeared on his features. Yes, Henry, you're so correct. Christy brought the positivity we need. Sometimes He Yu can be a sweetheart. Take a guess, he said stiffly. It's not the year of the dragon. It has nothing to do with what year it is. I wasn't born in the year of the dragon. It has nothing to do with the zodiac. I don't like dragons either. Who cares what you like? Xie Qingcheng found his sudden change in attitude baffling. He was like a little concubine having a sudden mood swing. He ran out of patience. I don't know. I give up. He Yu's face fell. When he looked down, there was even a pout settling onto his cheeks, a clear indication that he was angry but unwilling to talk about it. He snatched the little dough figurines from Xie Qingcheng, gripping them tightly in his hand. If you lack the insight to appreciate them, then forget it. It's not like I have to give them to you. I can also keep them for myself. Oh my god. This is, okay. Alright. This is probably my favorite art so far in this whole thing. So we're gonna look at this. Also, I visualized the dragons totally wrong. Now that I see what they're like, I'm like, oh, okay. Wait, no, wrong window. Can you see? He's holding the tiny dragons, and they're, like, twisted around little sticks. And he's holding them, like, face to face. And he looks so grumpy. Okay. Where am I? You like dragons? Xie Qingcheng asked. I like... Hu Yu's voice suddenly hitched. What did he like? He couldn't get the words out. The boy fell into sullen silence once again, lowering his head to quietly pick at the little dough dragon's scales. Hu Yu could see that Xie Qingcheng had no idea that he'd wanted to give him these figurines as New Year's presents because, in the depths of his heart, they were a pair of lonely dragons, fundamentally incompatible with normal people. Henry, Shiga's eyebrow game is crazy. That's the sassiest side-eye. Yeah. Just like a damn emotionally unavailable workaholic, Xie Qingcheng wasn't romantic at all. Meanwhile, Hu Yu had stood there in the cold and told the artisan again and again to sculpt the two dragons so that they look very realistic, to make one red like fire and the other silver like frost. He'd even had the artisan inscribe the pinyin abbreviations of his and Xie Qingcheng's names onto the scales. I wish we had this image in color, actually. No. He was a dumb fuck paying his New Year's respects to another equally dumb fuck. What a truly unimaginable amount of dumb fuckery. No! He scratched out those stupid abbreviations with no expression on his face. In the end, he threw the little dragons down onto the table, before turning away to chat with the aunties and uncles, ignoring Xie Qingcheng completely as he flitted about like a social butterfly, courting the affections of the middle-aged and elderly crowd. See, now I can see. We've lost the chance for Xie Qingcheng to, like, pick up the dragons and inspect them and realize that it has their names on them, because he scratched them out. Which, which ones were the best two sentences? He was a dumb fuck. What a truly imaginable amount of dumb fuckery. Because those are really good. The dinner remained in full swing, even as the clock ticked past 9 and 10 at night. Aside from the pair of mortal enemies that was He Yu and Xie Qingcheng, everybody else chatted away happily and with great enthusiasm as they covered the ground with melon seed husks and peanut shells. But then... Oh lord, okay, Meat Bun, what is happening now? Oh god, okay. I gotta lock in, because I just turned my head and saw a line on the last page of the chapter, and I didn't need to see that yet. Okay. But then, something happened that no one could have foreseen. The area closest to the alley's entrance was the first to fall into disarray. Something happened there that put a sudden stop to all the warm laughter. However, those sitting further inside had yet to react and were still chatting away and cracking jokes. It wasn't until the silence swept in like a tide that the people further in realized that something strange had transpired. Everyone turned their heads. What's wrong? What's going on? Ah! The person who spoke inhaled sharply as realization dawned. My goodness. How can this be? Is that really her? The unusual hubbub became more and more obvious until even Xie Qingcheng, who'd been somewhat distracted the entire time, ended up turning to glance over with absent-minded eyes. That one glance was all it took. A buzzing noise droned through his head as all the blood drained from his face. Someone had arrived. Standing nervously at the entrance to the alley was a woman. She looked about 30, and she was very pretty. She had some makeup on and was wearing a heavy, luxurious fur coat. The only thing that stood out starkly from the rest of her glamorous getup was the bruises on her face that even makeup couldn't disguise. The woman was carrying an Hermes bag, yet she faced everyone's complicated gazes with an air of embarrassment. Never mind the residents of Moyu Valley. Even Heyu would never forget that face. It was Xie Qingcheng's ex-wife, Li Ruoqiu. Okay. Okay, Meat Bun. Okay. No. Now I get it. This whole time, I was like, the chapter title, why is she allowed to come over to your place? I was like, oh, okay, so it was about Xie Shui, which is like the first person I thought of. My second thought had been, oh, it's somebody else. It's like mysterious. And then this whole time, no, this is who that chapter title was actually about. It was about Li Ruoqiu. Why is she allowed to come over to your place? I'm glad we're not stopping there for today, as far as I know. Yes, we have one more chapter. Thankfully, we might go a little bit over. Today is a 57-page day, which that's fine. So, we are on page 171 for chapter 101, which is called, Why is she allowed to talk to you like this? Li Ruoqiu had run away from home on New Year's Eve. Back then, she had decided to get together with that married man, but they were discovered by his wife. The love between the man and his first wife had burned out long ago, so this matter became the last straw for their failing marriage. After the man and his first wife got divorced, Li Ruoqiu became the man's legitimate wife, and for a while, their marriage was very loving and affectionate. The man was a sweet talker and a romantic. He could make up for all the pleasant surprises that Xie Qingcheng never gave her. She truly loved him very much in return. When money was particularly tight for him, she sold all of her valuable jewelry to support his risky foray into business. Their little home became more and more prosperous, and their lives more and more joyous. Until another, even younger girl appeared. She didn't know when exactly her husband met that girl, but when she was at a beauty salon getting a facial, she accidentally ran into him bringing a pretty young student in to get her breasts done. Li Ruoqiu tried her best to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was for work. After all, he was running a modeling agency now, so perhaps... Before she could even finish her thought, however, she saw from her secluded corner the man touching the girl's face with a grin as he said in a low voice, I think you'll be even more perfect with a bigger chest. Ugh. In that moment, all of her illusions shattered with a rumbling crash. When Li Ruoqiu divorced Xie Qingcheng, she had said that love was reckless, that responsibility, ethics, and everything else could be sacrificed for its sake. Then she saw the bitter fruit born from a love without responsibility after its blossoms had withered and fallen away. On New Year's Eve, the girl showed up to start a fight, with a child in her rounded belly. Li Ruoqiu was infertile, so the sight hurt her deeply. She argued with that girl. And then the husband who had once adored her, who had once claimed that she was his one true love, viciously beat her to protect that girl and the vile spawn in her belly. Unable to bear the pain and humiliation, she'd quickly gathered her things and left that house. Sitting in the high-speed rail station, she didn't know where to go. Her parents had already passed, and her old friends had all drifted away from her because of the arrogant attitude she'd developed after becoming a rich socialite. She suddenly began to miss Xie Qingcheng very, very much. There was no way she'd be able to buy a holiday season high-speed rail ticket this late. But she was currently in Hangzhou, which wasn't all that far from Huzhou. She decided she might as well burn through some money and called a taxi to Moyu Alley. Seeing her in such a state, the taxi driver couldn't help but ask, "Miss, are you all right? Going out on New Year's Eve. Is your husband mistreating you? Should I take you to the police station?" Lee Rocho stared blankly at her reflection in the car window. Many years ago, as a 20-something, she had once sat in a taxi and complained, "My husband's so unromantic. It's Valentine's Day, yet he didn't even buy me presents or get me flowers." The driver had smiled. "Miss, whether he gets you flowers isn't that important. Isn't it enough for him to treat you well?" "But he didn't even get me flowers. How can that be considered treating me well?" The driver had looked at the numerous shopping bags in all shapes and sizes lying in her lap, shaken his head, and said no more. Only now did Li Ruoqiu understand the meaning hidden behind the driver's words that day. Xie Qingcheng never remembered anniversaries or holidays. He was too busy, and he didn't like wasting time on such saccharine things. But he always left his payroll card with her and gave her a clear view of their finances. Whatever she wanted to buy, however she wanted to spend his money, he never uttered a word of refusal. She could have used the money that he gave her to buy many, many bouquets of flowers. I will say this. The flower thing, I feel like it's like a... Some people have this thing where they think that, like, oh, everyone has to do, like, certain kinds of, like, romantic gestures in a relationship. And for me, I feel like it's more, like, on a personal level. And part of it is, like, if you're in a relationship and the person doesn't do, like, romantic gestures for you and you want them to and you communicate that to them, then they should care enough to, like, do that for you. Like, okay, I will buy you flowers on your birthday or on such and such time. Because, like, that's what you do in a relationship. Like, you do things for the person that you care about, you know, like, if that's what they want. But it's you know, not everyone is, like, into that, right? So it is, like, the thing is, this whole time, I felt a lot of sympathy for Li Ruoqiu, even though she did a lot of messed up stuff, but so has everyone in this book. And so I can't help but, like, feel bad for her. But also there is the thing, of course, that, like, Li Ruoqiu pursued Xie Qingcheng, and he was never the romantic type. And she sort of was shocked that he was not that type. So there's also that, like, thing where it's like you kind of knew this from the beginning. So it's complicated. But I do understand her in this situation being like, where am I gonna go? What am I gonna do? Okay, yeah. She could have used the money that he gave her to buy many, many bouquets of flowers. Miss? In the end, as if transported from a different lifetime, Li Ruoqiu sat in the taxi, covered her face, and broke down into silent, bitter sobs. Before, my husband was such a good man. He was so kind-hearted and responsible, she cried. He treated others well and treated me even better, but I... With great difficulty, the driver eventually managed to calm her down. Then Li Ruoqiu looked at the dark bruise on her face, wiped her tears, and did her best to hide the injury with makeup. She knew that by going back, she would be attracting odd stares, gossip, and even looks of scorn. She had planned on walking discreetly up to Xie Qingcheng's house and knocking on his door to ask if she could stay for the night. She hadn't anticipated that Mo Yuali would be holding a banquet. Now her miserable appearance also became his embarrassment. Just like that, the jubilant bustle of the last day of the year was overtaken by an endless, awkward silence. Xie Qingcheng and Li Ruoqiu sat down by themselves inside the house. Since they were talking, it would be impolite for anyone else to enter. After a very long silence, it was Xie Qingcheng who spoke first. "Have some hot water." He stood up and poured some water, then passed it to her. While the water was quite warm, the cup wasn't her old one anymore. In a daze, holding the disposable paper cup reserved for guests, she dissolved into tears once again. Xie Qingcheng had seated for the sofa, while he sat on a stiff chair a very respectful distance away from her. What happened? Li Rocho shook her head as she wiped repeatedly at her tears. After a long pause, she finally managed to say, Xiege, I'm sorry. I didn't know that there was going to be a celebration like this today. I didn't want to make things awkward for you. It's fine, Xie Qingcheng said. He was the kind of person who held deeply entrenched ideas about gender roles. He believed that women were vulnerable, that they shouldn't do this or that, and had a lot of very old-fashioned ideas. Because of his chauvinism, he rarely held anything against women. Meanwhile, Li Rocho had always been a very idealistic woman. She liked to watch idle dramas and daydream, and she easily let herself get carried away by emotions, consequences be damned. Aside from that, however, her intentions were usually good, and she could even be very tender-hearted and kind in some other respects. Otherwise, Xie Qingcheng would never have married her in the first place. But she had always loved romance and liked to fantasize about irrelevant details. Xie Qingcheng never lived up to her expectations, and she could never stop herself from arguing with him. That was why Xie Qingcheng had gotten into the habit of never contradicting her. Regardless of whether she was being reasonable, he would just let her throw tantrums as she pleased. He wouldn't argue easily with a woman, and especially not with his wife. Perhaps it was precisely the way he held himself back that fed into an insatiable desire in some deep corner of Li Rocho's heart. She subconsciously felt that no matter what she did, Xie Qingcheng would always understand her, that he would never fight with her. But of course, there was no way Xie Qingcheng would let her have her cake and eat it, too. After the disintegration of their marriage and the filing of their divorce papers, they hadn't been in contact at all. Not until this very moment, when she suddenly appeared with a bruise on her face and tears in her eyes. She told Xie Qingcheng the whole story. Xie Qingcheng looked at her. After a long silence, he asked, What's your plan moving forward? I don't know. I have nowhere else to go, and it's New Year's, but I feel horrible. I understand. Li Rocho started crying again. How could he do such a thing? Silence descended. Xie Qingcheng took out a cigarette. He was about to flick his lighter on, but he gave her a long look, and instead of pressing down, he set the cigarette aside. You're always living in your fantasies, Li Rocho. Xie Qingcheng spoke calmly and sensibly, just as he had countless times before whenever she encountered difficulties. But reality might not be able to live up to your imagination. It might even contradict it completely. After everything that's happened, you should think about what you want to do from here on out, and whether you're willing to keep living like this. If you are, then you should go back and have a proper talk with him. Nope, he hit her. Absolutely not. If you're not, you have to preserve evidence that you can use to protect yourself and find a reliable divorce lawyer. What do you think I should do? I can't help you with this decision. Xie Qingcheng looked at her calmly, neither casting stones down the well nor treating her with any additional warmth. Li Rocho, you should know that there's nothing between us anymore. A shudder ran through Li Rocho's body. After a long moment of silence, she raised her head and slowly looked around at the place that had once been her home. For a hazy moment, she could almost see her own silhouette from the first time she'd walked into this house as a new wife. The young woman hugged her new husband next to the window, standing up on her tiptoes to kiss him, and beaming at his mild expression as she said, I love you so much. I want to be with you forever. But now, everything had changed. The traces she'd left on this room had all been erased. There was only a faint mark on the wall where their wedding photo used to hang. It was with the man before her that she had grown into her womanhood. In the beginning, she thought everything about him was wonderful, but by the end, she thought everything about him was terrible. She'd always felt that Xie Qingcheng had never given her enough, but she'd never wondered whether she was the one who wanted too much. As Li Rocho looked around, she thought of everything she'd been through in this house, and of her tumultuous marriage now. She wondered if she hadn't cheated. Would she still be folding dumplings and making 8 treasure rice with Xie Qingcheng like she used to? Would Xie Xue still call her Xiaoze? And and the sound of children playing and laughing trickled in from outside. Seized by some unknown emotion, Li Rocho suddenly spoke to Xie Qingcheng in a deeply sorrowful voice. Xiege, what is it? If only we could have had a child together. Silence. Then maybe things wouldn't have. She didn't finish, probably because it would be too unbecoming. Unearthing a handkerchief, she dabbed at her tears. I'm sorry, she said softly. At first, it had seemed like a test from the heavens. In the end, it became a punishment. She and Xie Qingcheng didn't have a child when they were together, so her heart had been more easily swayed. Sure. She'd had an affair with another man and felt that she could start her life over. She had rejoiced at obtaining her freedom in that way. But later, because she couldn't have children, she was ousted by a younger girl for that same laughable reason, and became a victim of adultery herself. Full of grief, she lost her marriage. Yeah, honestly, it is a huge, huge, huge relief that they did not have a kid together before all that stuff happened. Um, God, yeah. Whew, I'm glad about that. Perhaps this was what people meant when they said that fate was a fickle mistress. Xie Qingcheng shook his head. He didn't know what to say either. He glanced down at his wristwatch. It's getting late. I'll have Shue take you to a hotel and get you a room so you can rest. You should go. He stood up, ready to see his guest out. Li Rocho's eyes were filled with hurt. At last, she looked at the untouched cigarettes on the table. You should smoke less. It's not good for you. Xie Qingcheng nodded, but he did not speak. He opened the door, planning on bringing her to Auntie Lee's house to find Xie Xue. However, he hadn't anticipated that the door would nearly collide with the young man the moment he pushed it open. Xie Qingcheng stared. Yu was leaning against the wall outside the door. The boy stood calmly with his hands in his pockets, his face absent of discernible expression. It was impossible to say how long he'd been listening. He met Xie Qingcheng's gaze as the door swung open, and Xie Qingcheng's eyes darkened. What are you doing here? Yu looked him up and down. The hostility in his eyes was clear, along with a repressed bestial instinct. But before he had the chance to say anything, Li Rocho walked out, her tears wiped dry and her leather bag packed up. Thus, the woman came face to face with this 19-year-old student. The moment Yu shifted his gaze to her, it became very placid. He gazed at her calmly. That is the end of the chapter. So, I'm guessing that what's going to follow is Yu is going to have some words for her because of that previous chapter title. Why is she allowed to talk to you like this? He's going to be like, hey, you can't talk to him like that. I mean, I guess in this situation, Li Rocho didn't say anything, like, too horrible. Like, from the tone of the chapter title, I was kind of expecting her to, like, get into an argument with Xie Qingcheng, and that's not really what happened. But still, I can see why Yu is like, you don't get to do that. So, I guess what I'm going to do is either, if my internet is actually working well enough on Wednesday, I will stream live on Wednesday. And if not, I'll, like, do a pre-recording and then premiere it at 3 o'clock, the regular time, on Wednesday. So we won't have to wait a whole week. And when we do come back, whichever way we do, we will be on chapter 102, which is called I'm the Only One Who Knows You Best. Fun times. Fun times. But I'm glad we ended there and not on the end of the previous chapter with the cliffhanger of Li Rocho showing up. So, that's good. So thank y'all for coming today. And sorry again that streaming has been such a mess. I'm I hope that my internet is fixed sooner than like the 15th. Like I hope they get to it sooner than like the basically the very last people. And I really hope that this just like fixes everything because I'm getting it's so frustrating, especially because I asked a friend of mine who's in the same apartment complex. I was like, "Are you having issues with your internet?" And she was like, "No." I'm guessing the problem is just when you try to stream, it's just taking more resources than like regular internet things. But I'm just like, why? I'm so tired of this happening. But yeah, thank y'all for coming here today. Yeah, we had some times today. Some fun and some not so much fun, but yeah. So I will see you on Wednesday in some form. Bye.